Hi, I'm Neil Dwyer. I teach English here at the college, and I help with the Connection series. This is the fourth and final reading of the spring semester. We had 3 writers come in at various times during the spring, and we had readings on the Leonardtown campus, the Prince Frederick campus, and here in La Plata. We plan to do the same thing in the fall and the spring of next year, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here to this final reading. And this reading, as you know, you walked in, you picked up a copy of the magazine. This reading, rather than featuring one writer, it features several writers and photographers. And if you look at the table of contents, you see we have a wide range of different themes, stories, poems. There's no one central theme. We just try to feature the best work that gets submitted each semester. And I want to thank each of you who are here this evening, who have come to read and to talk about your work, for your contribution to the magazine. Excuse me. So there are cards on the back table, and they'll basically, for those of you who are reading, they'll let you know when it's time to come up and read. So I don't do this alone, and if you open up the magazine, the table, right across from the table of contents, I just want to draw attention to some people here who have helped put this magazine together. Each semester we put out a call for submissions, and each semester we're amazed at the number of submissions that come in. And it truly is a testament to the interest in Southern Maryland for the literary arts and for photography. And we just feel it's an honor really to feature these works each semester. And these are people affiliated with the college, not affiliated with the college, people from the community, the 3 counties that we serve. So it truly is, it's a special publication, and I look forward to it every semester. I want to publicly thank my Connections website editor, Paul Toscano, from whom you'll be hearing a little later, and then the associate editors, Sonia Fernandez, Krista Kais, David Phelan, who is here, David Robinson, and again, Paul helps out to edit the magazine. Brenda Jones helps with the editing assistance, as does Michael Shelton with the production of this wonderful magazine. I really want to tell you, I've heard from people who saw copies of this while it was in production, and even people who've had just a peripheral look at the magazine in terms of putting it together they've called me, they've emailed me, they've said this is amazing. This is just really a wonderful issue, and I want to thank you all for contributing. I think it's going to be a wonderful evening. The program format is very simple. It's very informal. It is that each person can come up, and if you want to talk, like the photographers can talk about the work, what inspired it. The poets and the fiction writers can give a little background if you want. It's not necessary. Whatever you think would be helpful for the audience to truly enjoy your work. Behind me, if I guess from your angle you can see, right? This thing isn't too much in the way, if at all. We have all the photographs running by on a loop, so you can enjoy those while the reading is going on. Okay, that's enough out of me. I'll turn it over to William.
Good evening. My photo is located on page 49, and my photo is titled Girl on a Train, Milan, Italy. This time last year, my oldest daughter, who is in the photo, was studying abroad in Italy. She's an international studies major, and she was studying there for the spring semester. And during the time that she was there, she had a breakup with her boyfriend, and so for 3 or 4 days straight, she had called my wife and I at the house, and quite upset, and had asked if I would come to visit with her. And I said, of course, but I thought she was talking about a little further down the road, maybe a month. But she was talking kind of more immediately, and so I booked a flight to go to Milan, and 2 days later I was in Milan, and I spent a couple of weeks with her, hoping to kind of cheer her up. I don't know if I did or not. Doesn't look like I did too much. Looking at the photo, doesn't, but So we spent some time there in traveling in Italy throughout, just trying to get her away from the campus a little bit, on some day excursions. And but in this particular photo, we were headed to Geneva, Switzerland, to see my older brother. And so for about 4 hours on the train, there wasn't a whole lot of communication. Unfortunately, we were, reading, and she's texting, I think, as you can see in the photo there. But I tried to capture at different times when I was spending with her moments, I think, that kind of reflected what she might have been going through at the time. And so I think most of the time she never knew I was really taking the photo of her. As in this photo here, I was really pointing it outside of the train window, and I would just try to capture her within the framework of the photo. And I don't really think she ever saw the photo. I don't even think she knows that she's in the photo, and I know she doesn't know she's in here until sometime later. But that's my photo. So.
Good evening. I needed my poem last weekend. It was about shortly after 2 a.m. Sunday morning. My husband came into the room with my 7-month-old, and he said, "Can you help me, please?" And I just thought my son wouldn't go back to sleep. And I said, "Sure." I was asleep. And I saw his face was he was grimacing. And I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "I'm dying." And he stood up and collapsed on the floor. And in that next nanosecond, as I'm holding my son, he's lying there, a million moments passed by me. And I'm thinking, how can my world shift like this? And what am I going to tell my daughter tomorrow when she asks, "Where is Daddy?" And all of these questions came to mind. So my poem is entitled, "The Oldest Tree." I wish I could talk to the oldest tree. I wonder what it would say to me. Generations have come and gone, earth bows before its throne, wrinkled eyes from storms and rain. Arthritic branches bent in pain, yet it remains. Branches stretching, roots reaching, all the while quietly teaching me how to be strong. Thank you.
Good evening. I don't normally talk about my poems, but I will give it a whirl. If you like what I say, there's a tip box at the back. My poem is "Poets Are Like Birds," and I wrote it reflecting back on when I was a full-time stay-at-home mom, and I had that longing to have the freedom just to be an artist, the time to be an artist, the longing to be an artist, but being rooted into the everyday of dishes and children and babies and duties. So, poets are like birds. Poets are like birds, pulling words like worms from earth, singing poems, singing Phoebe, Phoebe, chickadee-dee, pulling words like worms from earth, brown thresher couplets on telegraph lines, singing Phoebe, Phoebe, chickadee-dee. I lean on the kitchen windowsill, watching brown thresher couplets on telegraph lines. Now the baby is awake. I lean on the kitchen windowsill, watching the joyful, bouncing flight of poets and birds. Now the baby is awake, hungry and needy. I hold her, seeing the joyful, bouncing flight of poets and birds, dishwater and soap clinging to my hands. Thank you.
Hi. This is a little poem, so I'm not going to say a lot about it except that I wrote this poem when I was graduating from St. Mary's. And let it speak for itself then. Thin dream. Come a May skinny day, slipping into the wind, petals unfurled, dew, drip, drop, dripping. sunward stemming, I will tower the trees.
Hi, I'm Judy Allen Leventhal, and I teach here. My poem is on page 14. Teachers have this interest in, and I'm an English teacher, of course. And so I've been thinking about parts of speech, which is a strange idea in the first place, and what's a part of speech, and parts of speech aren't really what you speak anyway, when you think about it. And when I teach the developmental classes especially, it's important to help students understand what a complete thought is and that you need the parts of speech to make them function. And it's so easy to have all the parts, but the sentences don't function. So I always use this idea of you've disabled the sentence, it's not functioning. And so this poem is sort of about that, but not exactly, but that's sort of how the genesis of it comes around, if you can make that connection. Anyway, it's very short. Conjunction. Sentences disabled, enabled. You love someone. If you love someone. You love someone. Whether you love someone. You love someone. While you loved someone. You love someone, so you love someone. When you love someone, conjunction is key.
Hi, I'm Larry O'Brien, and my wife submitted this one, but it's about Hurry Store. So Hurry Store is a country store, and for those of you who know Hurry Store, it actually exists in Clements, Maryland. This is not intended to be a historical document. It's really kind of a amalgamation of a number of country stores and my memories from the early 50s. So for those of you who maybe don't remember the early 50s, there might be some anachronisms, but in any case, I'll go ahead and start here. It's called Dust and Treasure. Hurry Store and Tavern stands at the intersection of Clements like a ghost mother, eyeing the passing world with distrust. Idle souls of old farmers and day laborers from a previous century, covered in the dust of slow progress, sit tilted back on crates on her porch, lean on her railings and porch posts, and perch on her dangerously crooked porch steps. Like drying laundry draped over any prop, they hang stiff and still, their contemplation stirred only slightly by the periodic breeze of traffic through the intersection or some other barely noticeable event within their view. Occasionally stirred to sudden gusts of laughter that just as suddenly dropped to silence. They mark the day's events beneath lowered brims and the black shade of the midday sun. The sounds of heat in the grass, conversations from inside the store, and the song of a single cricket somewhere near the corner of the building all filter through the thick haze of humid air and the beer and whiskey buzz. At their feet, pressed into the gravel like shiny cobblestones, are 1,000 bottle caps, a rich tableau of new and antiquated brands. Whenever we stop at the store, I stare at them, crouched down and squinting like a miniature jeweler, poring over a spread of loose diamonds, looking for that unique find, a classic shape, an exotic style that make a simple soda or bottle of beer seem so special. Today was no different. Daddy always spoke to Nace. I had never heard that name before, But later, I would meet lots of Naces, short for Ignatius, I learned. A Jesuit name like most of the Aloysiuses and Ignatiuses and Francises that populated half of the county. At one time, a Jesuit mission, St. Mary's County had been the Siberia of the Baltimore and Washington clergy, where young priests cut their teeth and earned their first real assignment. Middle-aged priests were sent for lessons in humility or obedience. And the truly old ones came for final pasturing. If you were lucky, you got the old ones. Then you could doze on Sunday mornings. St. Ignatius appeared in the doorway in khaki with a broad grin and a red and white can of Budweiser buried in his huge hand. He disappeared in the dark with my father, which left me outside in the glaring sun in front of the old porch with Mookie. I stared at the ground more intently now, partly because I didn't know what to say to Mookie, and partly because I was a little nervous. I always had a hard time understanding him at first. And then he stared so intently when he spoke. His face was the color of the asphalt road, with pitch black eyes and a sea of yellow, ringed with blood red. His black skin sagged like the pools of road tar slowly cooling after the sun falls behind the side of a building or behind a large shade tree. White whiskers sprung from his black face, softening the corners and sometimes sparkling when the sun caught them. But now, Mookie sat silently in the shadow of the porch roof, framed by the tin sunbeam bread sign in the window. Chin doubled up on his old chest, the brim of his black straw hat pulled low over his eyes. In this double shade, I couldn't tell if they were shut or open. I wanted to know, but I couldn't bring myself to look long enough to discern. So I pretended he was napping and didn't speak. I got a stick and went to work on the caps, prying up an upside-down cap to see what was hidden. "If you gets money, boy, it's mine, you hear?" I jumped. Mookie laughed low and shook. His whole body shook when he laughed, his clothes flapping like so much dirty laundry. Yeah, yes, sir. You one ambitious soul, child. Look at you digging and carrying on. What you got now? Some kind of treasure there? I done cleaned up this place too many times. You find something, it's yours, you understand? You keep it. He whispered, "Go on in there and get you one of them Red Hots." His one eye, the one that sags lower than the other, opened wide, and I pictured Red Hots after you suck them for a while, and the white starts showing through the red. And all I could think of was plunking one of them in place of one of Mookie's red eyes. "Yes, sir," I said. "I ain't no sir, boy. I was just Mookie, just Mookie." He trailed off, and chins slowly lowered to his chest, just after a slight chuckle that lightly shook his shoulders. "Yes, sir," I said. He just grinned. Soon that faded. Mookie was a fixture at Clement's store, like the antiquated gas pumps in the ice house. He pumped gas for the occasional traveler who didn't know their way around the place. He roused himself twice a day to empty trash barrels. His best job in the summer was loading ice into the ice house, which he did artfully. The ice truck would back up to the wide oak plank loading platform, and Mookie sprang to life. Straddled between the open doors of the truck and the ice house, with a single swift, one-handed move, he clamped onto block after block of ice with huge iron tongs and gracefully swung them off the truck and into the ice house. Thick forearms knotted deeply, revealing a deceptive strength. For a 70-plus-year-old man who had worked tobacco fields and road construction all his life, he was remarkably able. But you'd never notice unless you witnessed an ice delivery. Most other times, Mookie's abilities were well hidden under a worn black straw fedora hat with a white band and the cover of well-worn and wrinkled khaki work clothes. I looked at him now, at rest in a heap on the old metal porch chair, and wondered. I wondered about his house. I didn't know where he lived. I wondered about his family. Sometimes his two daughters came by to get bread or milk or to drop off his lunch, which he always ate outside at the table under the cigar tree, unless it was raining. Then he would eat on the porch, but never inside. I knew he had grandchildren because I had seen a boy looking out of the rear window of his daughter's car one day. The boy looked younger than me, or maybe just a little smaller. I couldn't tell. We stared at each other as the car pulled off in a dirt cloud. Was Mookie married? I wondered, since I had never seen or heard about his wife. He was just Mookie, like the gas pumps, there to do a job. Not particularly important in themselves, as long as they function. And after, you go on your way. That was Mookie. The sound of laughter and shorter, louder talk told me my father was winding up the talk with Nace and would soon emerge with a brown bag of country sausage or bread or milk or some bloodworms for the night fishing he and Mama liked. He also always got Fig Newtons. I ran to the car, reached up, and with both thumbs plunged the stiff chrome button that opened the heavy door and jumped into the front seat, sliding across in front of the steering wheel and over to my side. I waited for my father to step off the porch. Without fail, he would turn just before the steps and make one more comment, which would turn into another 5 minutes. I bounced on the seat springs on my knees, facing backward over the seat back, lightly calling, "Dad! Dad!" He was deaf to me. Finally, he turned, got into the car, and we drove off, leaving the ice house, the gas pumps, and Mookie behind in a fresh dust cloud. I reached into the brown bag, searching for anything good. There was a smaller brown bag, neatly folded shut, in the corner under the bread. "Those are for you later, if you're good." "I've been good," I complained. "Okay, you can have one now," he said. I reached in and pulled out the small bag, opening it, and spilling the contents onto my lap, a half a dozen Red Hots. I stared. They stared back. I slowly collected all but one, dropped them into the bag, and popped the last one into my mouth, but not before trying it out for an eye and looking into the side mirror. Mookie as an 8-year-old.
My photograph is on page 43. It's not deep in meaning as Williams was. However, the interaction between light and shadow is a favorite theme of mine. This is the water tower in La Plata, which I pass probably 10 times a day. And once I passed it, I saw what I thought was incredible shadow. So I turned around, and there's a parking lot right there. So I snapped quite a few pictures with the hopes of getting one that I like. Thank you.
I don't know how many of you are familiar with haiku. I suspect far more now than were when I first heard about it. When I first got out of college, I lived in a town right outside Manhattan. We were all, most all of us were commuters, Teaneck, New Jersey. Near Hackensack? No? Anybody? Sure. Okay. And I commuted, as so many people did, to New York, to Manhattan, and I began working at Doubleday on Madison Avenue in the editorial department. This was a long time ago, and in that era, and I trust that things have changed, girls didn't get ahead. That was a known thing. It didn't matter what your IQ was or your abilities or anything else. But we were hired, and we worked hard, and it was a learning experience. Doubleday did have, I don't know that they still do, I say right now I'm in retrospect completely, because I've moved down here, many years ago. And they had a paperback section, and these people were sitting out in a room, not perhaps quite this size, with dividers in between, so there were no secrets and what have you. And the books were out, and you could go kind of help yourself, and you had the permission to do that. But there was a small paperback, and it was about so thick, and it was about haiku. I had never heard of it. At the time, it gave the history, and this was a 13th century, I believe. I've done no reviewing, so this is mental for me today. In Japan, I learned that most of the subject matter was about nature. And these, of course, were in the Japanese language, so I don't know what the pentameter was or anything else. But I did learn about haiku. I still have that book elsewhere in my mixed up house that I'd had a flood in quite recently. But that is what I learned, and I never had to learn to write it. I used the format that was listed in that book, and I was told at one point there was a contest, and I wrote to the guy to see what the rules were and what have you. And I guess I told him what my format was, and he called me up and he said, "They're not using those things anymore." And I didn't know what to do about it, so I still do it using those things. So you're looking at history, I presume. I don't know what they are doing now, but there are 21 syllables, and they're 3-liners, and it doesn't seem to matter how many syllables are in each of them. I mean, as long as you conform, as long as I conform, so those are my standards. Mm-hmm. And when I came down here from suburban New York, New Jersey, I was thrilled with the accessibility and whatever of farmland, of farm animals, of nature's production, so to speak. And I ultimately got a canoe. I had a canoe made, and I spent many, many hours on Piscataway Bay, because I lived near there, and just come across and what have you. It was always full, and I haven't been able to be there for the last few years. But there were all kinds of bird life, so not only was I absorbing for one reason, but it was full of stimuli for me. And I'm still writing this stuff periodically, not so much now. I'm distracted with doing some other things, like cleaning up after the flood and the hurricane where I have property over in Calvert County and stuff. But I still get my inspiration from riding around, and looking at Mother Nature, be it dandelions as it used to be, or whatevers, and putting cows, and on the water, of course, whatever they were offering me. So, and I always had a pad in one hand or sitting on my knee, and a pen, I guess, behind my ear, and would take my notes. So that's how I've done most of my poetry writing. And it gave me offerings of all kinds of things to learn about. You know, it opened avenues. So they're here, and I guess I'm supposed to read them. What page am I on? I got here late. Huh? 40. Well, you don't have to listen long. You see they're very short. And by the way, when I tried to enter that contest, the guy told me, I guess I said, "You're not writing haiku by today's standards," and he kind of read me off, and so I said, "Okay." I don't think I said thank you. I probably am not. But anyway, so these are 4-liners, and you don't have to sit. You stay with your morning. Okay. Mellow yellow, goldfinches in spring plumage mimic the brilliance of my daffodils. Stepping out. Egret wears long black stockings like a can-can girl at the Moulin Rouge. Flight delayed. Pragmatic great blue challenges darkness, fishing for one more big one. Quiet beauty. I plucked a blackjack oak leaf, color subtle as a female redbird. And I would say that one of the most amusing things and educative things for me, I guess, or educational perhaps is the adjective, there are indeed, and I have a nomia right now. What are the darn things? So they're not seals, beavers, okay? Piscataway Bay then, I haven't been back on Piscataway Bay now for maybe 4 or 5 seasons. But there were beaver houses there. Have any of you seen them? And usually you didn't see the beavers. I don't know whether they were sleeping when people like me were looking them over or trying to look them over, I don't know what, but anyway. So one day I was out there minding my own business in my canoe, and 2 same litter beavers came right up to my canoe. And the canoe, of course, is loaded with water. And we looked at each other, and I spoke to them, and they did their share of shattering and looking, I guess, testing the soundness of the canoe. And whereupon Mama Beaver, who was a fair distance away, spotted these kids of hers and swam right up to us and read them off. I didn't have to understand the lingo because the tone was there. And so they understood Mama, I guess, and I don't know what Mama Beavers do, whether they spank them or bite them or, their kids or what. So they went away the other direction. And she took one look at me, got real close to the canoe, turned around, and flapped and soaked me. I was like this. So I think I had more of a punishment than her babies did, but I've always just giggled myself when I remember that day. But anyway, the haiku has been a great joy to me, and just putting things together and doing it on my own time. And I've shared very little, really, except sometimes at Christmas. I put them in the Christmas cards. And thank you for smiling and putting up with my presentation. Totally unreal.
Hello. My poem's on page 44. I write when I get the urge. I don't really look for things to write about, but sometimes all of you who are writers know that you just have to write something down. Sometimes it just presses on you till you can get it out. So this poem came like most poems come, almost complete, and then I tweaked them forever. But the idea for the poem came over many, many years, actually. I used to have this recurring dream about a house. I would wake up and I would see this house, and it was always the same stone house. And over the years, I'd start to see more and more of the house. One dream, I was in the house looking out, and that's when I saw the tall pine. And then later on, I was at the back of the house, and I looked out the back, and there was a hill and a green field that just seemed to go right to the horizon with no fences and no breakage. And there was a round barn there. So I don't know. One day I just came to me. I was sitting at my desk, and that was my home in heaven. And I use the word heaven so people can kind of relate to it, but I always thought of it as being the other side. So apparently this is where I go when I get tired of this place. When I arrive at my home in heaven, I'll walk up the familiar stone steps, put my key in the worn oak door and enter. The baggage from this life litters the floor, to be unpacked and reassembled later. What seemed like a long visit of sorrow, I know now was only a weekend trip with a few hassles. Memories flow back from the past as my former families greet me and timeless companions join me once again. I show them my bags and latest lessons. Out the window, my old warhorse rests still, head down, hips slouched in the endless green field. Guard dogs and lap dogs and the last dog pack at the back door, baying their joy at my return. The one who has been friend, family, and lover appears in the parlor. We sit quietly, see each other's thoughts, and sip tea till eternity. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Carol Harvad, and my poem's on page 52. It's called An Artist's Heart. And along with writing, I paint and draw. And a lot of times I'll paint what I see in my mind, not what I see with my eyes, and I'll just put out a canvas there. And occasionally I can't think of anything to paint. And this was one of the instances. Sometimes words come a lot easier to me than images do. And when I looked at that blank canvas, I saw how pure it was, how innocent. It had no past. You know, it had no prejudices. And it just got me thinking and thinking. And then the Artist's Heart poem came out of my day to paint, right? An Artist's Heart. Relate not to past connections. No preconceived ideologies. No judgments from past experiences. Relate not one to past disappointments, to past disillusions or lies. See anew sold on its own accord, with fresh eyes, no disguise, no motives, no notions, just a pure bleached blank sheet of paper to create what you choose. With a color-splattered palette, draw a just conclusion.
Hi, I'm David Brantley, and my essay is on page 16. I used to teach here at the College of Southern Maryland. It's great to be back, even just for the night, but great to be back and seeing very familiar faces and being able to share this with you. I was one of those rare English teachers that didn't expect my students to write and then me just grade their papers with no interaction of my own. So whenever I challenged my students with a writing prompt, I wrote an essay with them and for them, kind of to model what I wanted out of their essays, but it also motivated me to keep writing because otherwise I got a little lazy and would go home and watch TV or, you know, do other things, drink wine, whatever I could to avoid the writing because it is, as our students understand, a tedious process. So this past semester, at the beginning of the semester, many of the students in my basic composition class, what would be English 1010 here at CSM, were really reluctant to get started in the semester, as new students quite often are. And so I wanted to challenge them to think of themselves in a different way, give them a chance to do narrative, which they're fairly comfortable doing, but to challenge thinking of themselves in a new way. And I had just undergone a life-altering experience. Many of my students had had me the previous semester, and so they knew that I had left the college for a month to have some surgery, and I came back 6 weeks later to start the semester, 70 pounds lighter, no hair, you know, just looking horrible. And so I was also relearning who I was, and this is how this essay came about. So open mouth, insert me. I've always been fascinated by languages and their origins, which may explain my natural drift toward teaching English, since it is, after all, my mother language. In 4th grade, I learned a minimum of Spanish. In 7th grade, I took on a little German and French, which I also attempted a few years later, but to no avail. Unfortunately, my ear for language was not paired with an ability, innate or learned, to speak a second language. So I settled for learning to read and understand a limited vocabulary in each of these foreign tongues. Once I entered high school, though, I found my passion, Latin. It is the root language of so many other languages, and while I did develop a proficiency in reading and writing in this most archaic of languages, I never had to worry much about its proper pronunciation, yay for that, or holding conversations with other students in the class, or with our very prim and precise teacher, Mrs. Klingenschmidt, to prove I was getting it. I continued my study of Latin in college to fulfill my foreign language requirement. I went from being one of 8 Latin scholars in high school to being the sole independent study geek who paid tuition at Westchester University and kept my professor employed. My love of the language never waned. I grew from memorizing phrases such as Veni, Vidi, Vici to better grasping the evolution of words and their impact on modern-day languages, the ones my current students are learning and mastering much better than I ever could. I recognize many of the words I studied in their original or derivative forms as I teach literature and composition, argument, rigor mortis, etc., bona fide. But the one I use now, every day, is stoma. I have one, I am one. Although Greek in origin, meaning mouth, the Latin derivative of stoma is simply defined as open or opening. Its application in my life is twofold, and both applications, one lifelong, one that is more recently acquired, define me for better or worse. I've always been an open person, open-minded, open-booked, open-ended. I don't shy away from my personal expression, even if I must occasionally couch my thoughts out of respect of others. That's not to say I never have reservations about things. I do. It's not to say I can't be very conservative in some of my perspective. Heck, look at the way I dress. And certainly as I age, my once open, liberal mind finds it less easy to adjust to change, to adapt to the whirlwind sweep of political, religious, economic, environmental, technological, cultural, and social changes that occur under the premise that all changes better humankind. Still, I continue to want to learn new ideas, to expand my worldview, to more fully appreciate the lives others lead and how those lives inform my own and mine theirs. Age has never diminished that hunger in me. I am at my best as a stoma in the educational environment. I get to apply my love of language in the classes I teach, and I have the extreme luxury, and it is just that, to witness the day my students become stomas as well, when they open their eyes wider than usual, smile, and recognize that they finally get it. That's when learning itself becomes lifelong for them. That's when their commitment to remaining curious and open to knowing more is sealed in concrete, whether they themselves realize it or not. They become the mouth of the next generation, and I know they'll pass on the crown. Medically, I'm also a stoma, or at least it's a defining result of my most recent physical trials with colorectal cancer and a 30-year battle with acute Crohn's disease. On November 17, 2011, I underwent surgery for abdominal perineal proctectomy resection with total colostomy. The shorter definition of that rather daunting and impressive procedural name is that I am left without my large intestines, my rectum, my anus, and the community of lymph nodes and sphincter muscles that typically compose that area of the body. What I am left with is a stoma, an opening created from the end of my ileum, small intestines, not taken as a result of the diseases. About 3.5 inches of the ileum are pulled through the stomach wall to the outside of the body, 2 inches from the navel. That portion is then turned inside out and back onto itself, and stitched into place to form a bud, a living piece of tissue to which I attach an unobtrusive ostomy bag that gathers my body's waste. Too much information? Maybe so. But it's the end result of a procedure that has altered my life, and it's the result about which most people who have the same fate won't share, as if it's shameful. Yet a large number of women and men wear an ostomy bag, either permanently, or if they are lucky, only temporarily until a follow-up surgery will allow their parts to be resectioned into a typical internal tract. Mine will be permanent. The stoma is now an external reminder of the me I have become, of how I'm now open in a new vein. I care for it as a father would care for his newborn, protecting it from harm and keeping it healthy, much as the stoma now serves me in similar ways as it allows me to get rid easily of the body's toxins. My wound nurse, a term used to define the women and men who work with ostomy patients, told me on the day she marked my body for the stoma's placement that seeing the stoma for the first time would likely be more disturbing than any other sight following my surgical experience, more so than the almost 20 inches of staples and sutures that closed me from back to front, more so than the loss of a normal rear end. She was wrong. I remained open-minded about what was happening to me throughout the process, as I have about what is yet to come. So when I saw the stoma 5 days later, once my body was finally able to produce waste again and I needed to change the bag, I simply asked how to properly clean it and prep for the next bag's attachment. I was neither freaked nor frightened. I accepted it as a part of my body, albeit a part that most other people would never get a chance to see of their own, except in x-rays and scans. I acknowledged at that point that its function gave new definition to David H. Brantley. I suppose if I exercised my normally perverse sense of humor, I could name my stoma. I have considered it. But I have too much respect for what being a stoma teaches me about life, about living in the face of adversity, to make light of it. The fact is that I remain a stoma in the way that I have always defined myself as a stoma, someone who is open, frank, and eager to take in as much of life and knowledge as I can absorb. I teach because the academic environment encourages and fulfills that hunger in me. The new stoma that I am, and will be from here on out, is merely a new dimension of myself, an expanded definition, the sort of Latin derivative of a word's Greek origin that marks evolution of language and thought, that alters a life when the recognition lights up inside and frees the mind to finally get it. My fascination remains intact, and I will use the experience of learning this to pass on the crown.
My name is Patrick Allen. My poem is on page 20. This poem, like a lot of the poems that I write, come up because of observation. Somebody says something and it kind of triggers an idea, and I try to, and what does that mean? What can I do with that idea? And so I actually was talking to Laura Polk, who is the chair of the division for nursing, and she is a nurse and she is a beekeeper. And she told me that when you have bees, if you move the hive at least 5 miles, the bees will reorient themselves and go on as if nothing happened. But if you move the hive 5 feet, they can't reorient themselves to the sun enough to be able to find their way back to the hive that's just been moved 5 feet away. And so this idea that if you move me this long distance, somehow I can deal with it, but if you move me just a little bit, it confuses me and disorients me. And so this poem kind of works out of that. So if you move the hive at least 5 miles, they will accept this relocation. But if you move the hive just 5 feet, they become lost, hovering 5 feet away over the position that they knew. 5 miles. Everything feels the same. I have my work. I have my siblings near me. Mother bathes us with a scent of purpose. But things have changed. The twin hills are moved. The clover was not where I expected it. The peonies were not there at all. The rhythm of my dance is less fluid somehow. 5 feet. Aunt Sue had windmill cookies with slivers of almonds baked in them. Mr. Weller let me clean out the bottle caps from the holder on the front of the Pepsi-Cola cooler. Mr. Francis's store had King 16 fruit bowl soda for 12 cents and hot dill pickles out of the barrel for a nickel. One time in the 1st grade, I came home from lunch. My mother gave me a dime and sent me to Gus's for meat and cheese. I ate a chicken liver sandwich on rye bread with American cheese, kosher dill pickle slices, Frank's red hot sauce, and French's yellow mustard on both sides of the bread. I took the rinds upstairs to Smokey, who gobbled the scraps from my outstretched hand and licked my fingers with his rough tongue for good measure. 3, between 5 feet and 5 miles. We hover above our own honeycomb construction, dancing kaleidoscopic images of experience. Memory traces somehow change, but still familiar over the years of time and place. One foot planted in front of the other, we travel with a restive, vague feeling of satisfaction. 5 miles from where we started.
Hello. My poem, Something Stronger, is on page 50. A little bit about the poem, I guess, writing it for my thesis manuscript in grad school, which I am graduating this summer. I'm very happy about it. Thank you. A lot of it is about my father, and this one came from a conversation that he was having for my son, where they were talking about spelling, and my father let him know that he didn't make it past the 10th grade. And then, so I kind of took that in, and I wrote a little bit about that in another poem. And then I talked to my mother the next day, and she just kept telling me over and over and over again about how proud she is of me, and that she knew I always could do it, and she never had it in her, and just this, every time I talk to her, she tells me this. So I came back to the paper, and my first line was what you see here, Something Stronger. I suppose I deserve applause each time I approach the dumb walls that raised me. The alcoholic whose knees ran out of hair to soften the carpet kicker blows. The Catholic Italian daughter of a florist whose rose stem hands, bleached and cracked, never wanted to hold mine in public places. These thin walls knew nothing of quiet, shelter, or keeping out the cold. Their all-day noises and low-lying drafts had nothing to do with how I learned to build something stronger.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Rich Follett, and you can find my poem Cinderella Deconstructed on page 30 of this magnificent magazine. And I come to you from the Shenandoah Valley, which is very fertile ground for poets, I must say. Beautiful out there. Lovely drive out here today, and a beautiful campus. Just lovely. I was the victim of a professor in my first year of college who told me I had no particular ability. And being a faithful and trusting lad, brought up to respect authority and wisdom, I took him at face value and put down the pen for 30 years. And I don't know whether it's just the fact that most of the people who can remember that story have now died, or whether I've aged into my own sense of self, but recently I picked the pen back up again. And I am a teacher of English and mythology for high school students. I have the privilege of waking them up to the idea that we are all quest heroes in our own epic adventure. And I spend a lot of time looking for a sense of the mythological in the everyday. Cinderella Deconstructed. She walked into the bar, and he did not look at her. At first, he seemed to her a footnote, a human etc., until the reality registered. He did not look at her. She was as she had always been, sashaying, swaying, sleek and slim-hipped in the little black dress of legend, an ephemeral pheromonal enchantress with a panther's predatory precision. He was inexplicably aloof. From the moment she realized he was indifferent, he became the sole object of her desire. She began a relentless, externally imperceptible implosion. Lowering herself to flirtation, she freshened her luscious lipstick, feigned inexperience, projected an air of prurient innocence, and, this was her pièce de résistance, pouted. For 50 feet in every direction, fully formed adult males became puerile, panting pinheads, throbbing and drooling untidily, scenting conquest. He alone was unfazed. Having no referent for diffidence, she became centrifugally desperate, a frantic, antic moth to his frore flame. As midnight approached, she exhausted the lexicon of known feminine wiles in pursuit of his faintest apperception. When at last he looked up, he looked past her. He did not look at her. At 1 minute before midnight, she, lurid in her lust and bereft of reason, deftly executed the last step of the dance of the 7 veils with wild abandon and threw herself prostrate and quivering before him. As a bar full of sweating barbarians erupted in ecstatic paroxysms, he looked at his watch. He did not look at her. Disgraced, defeated, and devastated, she ran shrieking from the bar. Months later, dressed like a scullery maid, she was folding her laundry at Duds and Suds when the little black dress of legend appeared unbidden between 2 dish towels. Bemused by the folly of her former self, she snickered wryly and allowed the barren garment to fall in a heap on the pockmarked tile. A quiet, gentle man picked it up and handed it to her. She did not look at him, but sensing his warm and admiring gaze, murmured embarrassed thanks and began a casual conversation to mask the awkward moment. Through 6 washloads, their dialogue continued, ranging from the everyday to the existential. He said, "I like the way you think." She said, "I feel as if I know you." At 1 minute before midnight, she stopped folding her laundry and, at last, looked at him. This time, he did not look at his watch. He looked only at her. They lived happily ever after. Duh.
Can't do better than that for a Friday night. Listen, thank you all for coming. Can we have one more hand for all the readers, please?